Okay, YouTube, this is going to be on religion and the origins of it and its connection to the worship of planets or planetary worship. Um, and I've talked about Christianity and its origins to sun worship before, but this is going to go more into um, basically all three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the connections they all have to the worship of the planets, basically. So Christianity is sun worship. We've pretty much established that. Um, there likely was no historical Christ figure, even if there was an historical Christ figure. We know that it probably largely doesn't matter because the worship and Christianity of Christ has far more to do with the worship of the sun, particularly with the worship of Roman Mithra, the religion of Mithra in Rome, which is where Christianity has a lot of its origins from, and not so much the actual worship of any historical Jesus. Um, Beyond that, um, we know that Christianity has that worship. Now, here's what you will hear a lot of Christians saying is that this somehow has something to do with the Catholic Church. A lot of Protestants, for example, will say that the original Christ worship, they worship Jesus. You will see Jews talking about Judaism is based on planetary worship, and a lot of Christians trying to become more Jewish in their worship because they think that somehow that has more basis in something other than the worship of planets. Well, here's an obvious problem with that. The Jews worship planets too. They just didn't worship the sun. They also do have sun blessings and things. I think it's ever so many years or certain cycles they'll have I forget how many now, but they will do a blessing of the sun. Rabbis will bless the sun or something like that. But in any event, the Jews worshipped Saturn. Their god was Saturn. They were a Saturnalian religion, and ancient Cana largely it was once believed that the Jews, in fact, did leave Egypt as slaves. The Exodus story. Obviously, that's mythology. What likely happened is they were slaves, many of them, but they came out of, or at least the original Hebrews we're talking about here, not so much the Jews we have now, who largely come from a country in Russia that named Khazaria, that I don't have the time to get into, but they came from Cana. The original Hebrews were slaves, largely in Cana. Is relevant in other places, and one of the places that some of the Jews, I suppose, came from or whatever, or settled down in was called Yahoo. That was the name of the town, and eventually that became the name of their god, Yahweh. Um, but ultimately, they come from Cana. Cana worshipped the god El, and that's also where you get Elohim from. The god El, was basically Saturn. One of the representations of Saturn was a giant bull type entity, bull god, that they would often throw. That the Canaanites, not so much the Hebrews, though I suppose they did it too. There's even references in the Bible that they did it. Would throw their children, the Canaanites and the Hebrews to a lesser extent, would throw their children into a giant bull god that had a fire made up in the middle of it, like a furnace. Is a sacrifice for the harvest, basically. That's where Judaism comes from. Passover, people talk about Christmas is the sun, it's the resurrection of sun. It dies around the fall. It dies in the fall. It's kissed by Judas or Scorpio. It rises, and then it rises again on December 25th. It rises on the 23rd or something like that, and then it reaches its low on the 23rd, and then it rises on the 25th. Well, so Christmas is sun worship. We know that. It gets the highest in the summer, it dies in the fall, it rises again on the 25th. Well, Judaism is actually Saturn worship, and they also worship the sun, because on the Passover, they talk about the plagues passing over Egypt and so forth. Really what it is the passing over of the sun completing its yearly cycle. The sun passing over, that's what the Passover is. That's one of their holidays, Passover. That's what it means. Um, it's Saturnalian worship. Um, Israel is also a pagan name that they gave their country. I believe they say it has something else to do with the prophets or something in their Bible, but it's pagan worship. Isis means ISIS, not the terrorist group, but the actual goddess. I don't know why a terrorist group, a Muslim terrorist group, is named after a pagan religion anyways, but, ISIS. Ra means Ramenon, or whatever, I get confused. Ramen, he was an ancient god, I'm a little out of it. Or Amen Ra, that's it, Amen Ra, sorry. So Ra means Amen Ra. Then El means Canaanite god El. Those are two Egyptian gods, and then the Canaanite Elohim, Saturn. So they're a Saturnalian religion. Their star, the Star of David, there is no Star of David. It's actually the Star of Saturn. The six-pointed star is also an occult symbol, and it's important in Satanism. My religion is Satanism. It's important in my religion because it has 3 sixes in it. The star is made up of 3 sixes, basically, the points and so forth. And it's the symbol of Saturn. It's the symbol of the planet Saturn. The star of El, the star of the god of Cana, El, and that's now the Jewish star. So that's where it comes from. It's not really a Star of David. There wasn't a Star of David. It's the Star of Saturn. Then Islam, getting off the Jews, that took longer than it was supposed to. Islam is supposed to be, and of course the Saturn worship eventually became Christianity, which became sun worship. They threw a lot of their Jewish origins to the back and basically just became sun worship. Of course, Islam is the worship of the planet Venus. Now, a lot of people used to think for years it was the worship of the moon and the moon god. The thing about the symbol of Venus, which looks like a crescent moon, and that's in the star, and that's the religion of Islam, is actually supposed to be Venus. They're probably connected to the ancient god, the Arabian god Sin. Sin was a god of Venus. Many people associate him as a moon god. There was a god named Elah that might have been Sin. But ultimately, Sin was an ancient Arabian god for Venus, and they use a star and crescent because they worship Venus. They're basically the worship of Venus. So that's the origins of these religions, and they do complete moon cycles, and the moon is important in Islam and Buddhism. Buddhism, oddly enough, venerates the moon in some of their holidays. Most of their holidays fall on certain dates having to do with the moon, full moons and certain things about the moon. So it's all sun worship. It's all moon worship, star worship, Venus worship, Saturn worship. That's what it is. It's the worship of these gods, these ancient gods that have to do with planetary cycles that you would see in the sky. In ancient times, we watch TV now. We don't think about the time. We just watch fucking porn and play games, and we don't. In the old days, in the ancient days, people had to commune with the world around them, and they were probably happier as a result. But they couldn't avoid looking at the sky, looking up at the night sky and looking at the stars and the cycles and the things that happen in the heavens, the activity and the astral cycles and so forth. So they had to look at it, and that's how the religions came about. P666.